Hi there, Member of Parliament Garnet Jennis here. It's great to be with all of you for the second of this new feature that we've launched on my page, bringing you updates directly from what's happening in Ukraine. We're calling this News from Ukraine's Frontline, and it's an opportunity for us to share some information with folks here in Canada and anybody else who might be watching about what really is happening on the ground in Ukraine in the context of the Russian invasion. We want you to be able to know these details to help you understand the impact and what you can do about it. And facilitating this in my office is Luba, who you met last week. She is an intern in my office with the Canada-Ukraine Parliamentary Program. So Luba, thank you so much for joining and helping to facilitate today's conversation. And I'll hand it over to you to introduce our special guest for today's discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Garnet, for having me. So today we're going to talk about the situation with farmers in Ukraine, and our guest speaker is Andriy Dykun. He is the former Deputy Minister of Agrarian Policy of Ukraine in 2014, civic activist, and now Andriy is the head of the Ukrainian Agrarian Council. It is a non-governmental organization that unites farmers from all parts of Ukraine and represents their interests. So thank you, Andriy, for joining us, and I think we can start our conversation.
Thank you. So, Andriy, I'll if you can maybe just kick us off by sharing a bit about the importance of agriculture in Ukraine, for Ukraine, but also for the world. During normal times, Ukraine is able to supply so much of the food that the world requires, and the interruption of that supply is going to have big impacts, not just for farmers in Ukraine, but for people in Africa and elsewhere in the world who rely on food from Ukraine. So thanks for joining us. I wonder if you could just share a bit about that to start us off.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. Just a few more words about myself. The Ukrainian Agricultural Council is an organization which represents the interest of mid-sized farmers in Ukraine. We have more than 1,000 members on the whole territory of Ukraine, and unfortunately today some of our members is up to 200 farmers which are on occupied territory. And for Ukrainian economy, agricultural sector is a crucial sector of Ukrainian economy. We have two crucial sectors. One is agricultural, another one is metal production. And as you probably know about Mariupol, and two biggest metal factories are destroyed today in Ukraine. Agricultural sector run for 17% of GDP of the country and around 55% of foreign currency which comes to Ukraine. And the war started on the 24th of February, and just a few weeks before we went to the fields. And it was very difficult situation because they attack us from all the sides besides the western borders of Ukraine. For the time being, it's like up to 85% of the fields are being consumed by the farmers. I could not say anything a lot about occupied territories because the situation is very difficult there. Russians arrived, they took grain from farmers. Most of all, they sent this grain by trucks to Crimea island, and from there they try to sell it to some countries like Syria, for example. They destroy elevators, they destroy machinery on the farms, and I think they're quite aware that the Ukrainian agricultural sector is very important for our economy. Big problem today, as you have told, in the peaceful time, Ukraine was feeding around 400 to 500 million people over the world. Today, Ukrainian ports are blocked by Russians. In our normal life, we were exporting like 5 million tons of grain per month. Today, in April, we have exported around 1 million tons with the western border. Our western partners from EU countries, they try to help us to arrange logistics, but for the last 30 years of our independence, all logistics of grain in Ukraine was forwarded to the ports, and it's really difficult to change directions of our export. So now we can export 1 million ton, maybe it could be 1.5, maximum 2.5 million tons through the western border, and that's maximum. So it is not enough. And for us, for farmers, the situation are really difficult because they can't sell anything. In order to go to fields, the Ukrainian government has done very good thing for us. They offered state guarantees, like 80% state guarantees for bank loans, so that they help farmers. But in 1 month, we will start to harvest crops. And a big question where to find money for that, where to storage all this, because at the moment we have more than 20 million tons of grain, more than 20 million tons of grain, which is extra. We are ready to export it, and but it looks like it is not possible for us as a farmers organization. We cannot understand why this question has risen just like for last week, because from the very beginning of the war we tried to talk to United Nations organization. They have food and agricultural organization which is called FAO, and it's their job to scream all about that the situation in Ukraine, that it would be a global problem. Half a year before the war, United States and other countries, they were warning Ukraine about possibility of the war. But Food and Agricultural Organization of United Nations were keeping silent that it would be big catastrophe in the world. Why it was like that? I managed even to talk to the president of that organization, who is actually a Chinese guy, and his first deputy is a Russian guy. So that's a big question. How come that we have all the sanctions and Russian people are working in a so important organization like Food and Agricultural Organization, which is located in Italy? Mm-hmm. And we were trying, we talked to them, we talked to Euro Commission, all the media who were approaching us, and we were giving them some information. We were saying about that it would be food catastrophe, global food catastrophe, the biggest in many years. And it was like, main topic was war, possible nuclear weapon usage and so on, but not food catastrophe. So that's good that finally politicians all over the world start to talk about this, and we hope that there are some ways to deblocate Ukrainian ports so we could start sell. Besides the problem of selling, we have another issue which is called diesel supply. Before the war, 60% of our diesel was imported from Belarus and Russia. 25% were imported by the sea, and 15% were produced in Ukraine. Now, due to the war, we do not buy diesel from Russia and Belarus. We cannot bring diesel by the sea, and Ukrainian producer of diesel was destroyed by Russians. So we do not have diesel at all. We have big lines on our gas stations. The price of diesel has risen 4 times since the beginning of the war, and we have a big shortage of diesel. So it's a big issue. Before, maybe it would be enough for June for farmers, but when we will have a real harvest somewhere at the end of August and September, this question is still under big question mark for us. Another issue which is I would like to point in this conversation is that from the very beginning of the war, many countries are trying to help Ukraine, and it's really helpful. I'm not talking about military help because it's always on TV, but from the very beginning, a lot of countries were helping Ukraine with bringing us some humanitarian aid like medicine, some food, and so on. And the big question which is now talked on the world is like 6 million Ukrainians left Ukraine. They are immigrants to the European countries where they are treated in a very good way. But another issue which is not underlined, and I cannot understand why we have more than 10 million people internally moved in Ukraine from east and south, where we have war. They moved to the central and western part of Ukraine, and it's 10 million people. It's 2 times more than has left Ukraine to EU countries. But EU countries are not in war. They have more or less strong economy. In Ukraine, our economy is almost dead. We have big war, and we have 10 million people internally moved. And during this time, we have this aid, especially food, which comes from other countries. And in our conditions, when logistics is very expensive, food costs much more in EU than it costs in Ukraine, because Ukrainian farmers, they cannot sell this food at all. And I would like to actually ask you and talk to all possible charity organizations and foundations in Canada, for example, that We really appreciate help, but under such conditions, the best help for us would be just pure give money to Ukrainian farmers. Farmers produce food, and we give this food to refugees internally moved inside of the country. Because in few months we will go to heating season, the world will be tired out of this war, and that actually what is Putin hopes for. It's obvious now that the war will last more than 1 month, and the longer it will last, the more difficult for Ukraine to survive. Because when you have 10 million people which are internally moved, now how we help them? There's almost no support from the government, because government and president, they try to fight. Their main objective for them now is to be focused on the war, and all these 10 million people are like it's volunteers. Yes, indeed, we get some support like humanitarian aid, but most of this support comes from Ukrainian farmers. So we, as a farmers, we support local municipalities, cities, small cities, villages, and try to give this food for free for all these refugees. But it can't last long, because we also have a big shortage of cash flow as a farmers, and that's actually we see some not really nice trend when more and more countries want to help, and they send like sausages to Ukraine, or they could send bread to Ukraine or whatever, and it's something which need to be produced in Ukraine. Helping Ukrainian farmers, you help Ukrainian economy, because for agricultural sector is the #1 economy in Ukraine before the war, and especially now. And by this, we help to move our economy, and on the other side, we help people who internally moved inside of the country.
That's all just such great information, and thank you for going through it all and helping us understand kind of the multiple interacting challenges that farmers face, the blockading in the Black Sea, limiting exports, and then also the challenges in just being able to proceed with normal life. Let me ask you one sort of further probing question, and then turn it over to Luba after that. What some of the things I've heard in news reports are about the use of mines by the Russians, and how the mining of areas and fields is going to potentially have make it harder for farmers to do their work, but also have long-term impacts. Could you share a little bit about that, and how that's playing out?
Yes, it's also a big issue, because we had a front of war was more than 500 kilometers, and the front was in all agricultural areas. And now we have fight in Kherson region, Zaporizhia region, Lugansk region, and Donetsk region, and it's all agricultural regions. And yes, a lot of fields are mined, especially on the deoccupied territories. Even so, farmers were sure that the field was not mined. They go to the fields, and we have lots of cases where tractors or other agricultural machinery were destroyed due to these mines on the fields. And I think, according to some predictions, take years to demine all that fields, because a lot of fields are mined, still a lot of fields with Russian. They left a lot of military equipment in the fields, and farmers, they don't know what to do with it. So it will take time. I know. How many exactly in hectares, it's still we don't know, because we have every day in some regions we are returning our territories, like in Kharkiv, losing territories, so the front is moving, and it's difficult today to say how many hectares of land are mined and how long will it take. But experts, they told us that it will take years.
Yes.
We have fields mined in 2014 and 2015, and before this 24th of February, it's like 8 years, not all of them were demined due to different reasons, not only military.
Yes, it's a big problem, and actually from 2014 it's been a big issue for Ukraine. And you also mentioned about the temporarily occupied territories, which actually is the Zaporizhia region, Kherson Oblast is fully occupied, and it's actually one of the biggest producers of vegetables and also crops. And do you have any information on the situation on these occupied territories? Because I know that Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine mentioned that almost 400,000 to 500,000 tons of wheat have been stolen from occupied territories. So Russia actually sending it to Crimea. And are there any more information on that?
So if to take, we have now Lugansk, Donetsk, totally almost all agricultural land in Lugansk region is occupied, in Kherson occupied, Zaporizhia almost occupied. So we have around 3 million hectares of black soils which are occupied, and around 450,000 hectares are irrigated land, which is the most valuable land in Ukraine out of 550. So it's like 80% of irrigation is under occupation, temporary occupation at the moment. So what they do on the occupied territories, in some places they even try to be nice at the beginning, but then it disappears. They force farmers to register their companies in Russian jurisdiction. So if the company is a Ukrainian farm on Ukrainian territory, now you need to register this company on other place. If you don't do this, the farm is, they call it nationalization. The farm will be nationalized, so it means that you will not be able to use this farm anymore. That's what they do. If farmers, most of the farmers, they are not most, all of the farmers, they are with quite Ukrainian, pro-Ukrainian position. So they, many of our, not many, but like more than 10 of our members, they are still in jail. They in jail farmers. They force farmers to sell grain to Crimea. If farmers do not sell grain, they could steal this grain, or they could simply come and just destroy a farm without any explanations. They just destroy it, or they can destroy machinery and elevators. They just explode elevators actually together, even with grain. But it was at the beginning. But now, in most cases, they try to take grain away. How many tons? Yes, I heard also this about up to 500,000 tons, but I have no. We don't know how to evaluate this, because it's war and a lot of different information is coming. Many farmers, they left the territory, so the companies, farms and people are still there, but farmers left because it's too dangerous for them to be there. I mean, most of them are active people, and they were always against Putin and supporting Ukraine. So as soon as they come, especially it's in Kherson region where they come very easily. We still cannot explain how come they comes from Crimea to Kherson. It was a small piece of land which was totally mined, but it was demined just before Russians come. And I hope that after the war and victory, someone will answer all these questions, because we lost Kherson region very fast, and half of the Zaporizhia region, we lost it very fast, and people were not able to even to run away from those regions. So most of those farmers who are with Ukrainian, pro-Ukrainian position, were in jail. Some of them were still some of them even still in jail.
Yeah. How does the requirements of fighting impact the agricultural work that happens? I'd imagine a lot of people that would otherwise be working are engaged, obviously, in the war effort. So, and many people have fled. How does that impact in the unoccupied areas?
I cannot hear you very well, so could you please repeat your question?
Okay, yeah, sorry. My question was just about the impact of when people are, many people are obviously needing to be involved in fighting and involved in the war effort. That's taking people away from the farms. How is that? What impact is that having on the agriculture sector? People needing to be away and involved in other efforts.
A problem, but it's a very good question. It's a real problem, but I would not say it's critical. From the very beginning of the war, many farmers went to fight like volunteers, but after some few weeks, it was clear that we need to go to fields. Because it was even a president speech. He asked farmers to go to fields, both farmers on Ukrainian territory and on temporarily occupied territories. It was a clear message from the president that our task is to go to fields. It's our front. But of course, a lot of employees and so on. We talked to the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Defense, so we could how to call бронювати, Люба, to put it on some kind of reservation.
Luba, you're muted there still.
Yeah, so
or not be drafted into the army. Yeah. So
the government gives us a possibility to reserve people who are necessary for agricultural operations. So we keep these people. And we have now like 200,000 people who are under reservation. It's totally in the country.
Yeah. So yeah, those people can work on farms and not be drafted to the army. Yeah.
Only for farm working, because we need
people. Yeah.
Luba, do you have one last question to ask before we wrap up today?
Yeah, just I think Andriy already mentioned how another question was about how international community, how other countries can help, and maybe you can just sum up the information, because you already mentioned that that's important to support local farmers of Ukraine, that they grow the food.
It's very simple. You see, as a non-government organization, last year we went through the national diligence audit. And we launched a charity fund 1 month ago. Now we work with countries, so it's much more easy and more efficient to use money when you, as I told you, send money. And you don't send food to Ukraine. We don't need food. We have a lot of food. The only problem we have, we can't sell this food in Ukraine. And we understand that we will have in few months humanitarian crisis inside of the country, because our cities are not ready for 10 million refugees. So we are preparing now stocks in all the cities. We talk to farmers, and if there are some organizations who are ready to help, so it's better to send money to our charity fund. After that, we do with European organization, we agree with them what they would like, what kind of food they would like, what type of food they would like us to buy. We buy and then distribute through our network to all these places. It's very simple.
Yeah.
And very efficient.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. This will be, I think, very, very useful and relevant information for our Canadian audience. How to help. Don't send things that are already in Ukraine. Send money to support those that are producing those things, and just understanding the strategic importance of ports in the Black Sea, and how many countries are so reliant on Ukraine, and the war is not just hurting Ukrainians, but it's also and we're going to see, I think, the ramping up of this impact on other countries. And one thing I'll just share with you is that for my constituency in Western Canada, large Ukrainian diaspora community, there is a great history of agriculture in my region that was driven by immigration from Ukrainian farmers. So we're grateful for the legacy of farmers in Ukraine, but also Ukrainian farmers that have come to Canada and other parts of the world and taken the skills they've learned and helped to bless our country as well. So we wish you well. We'll be thinking of and praying for you and your country, and the important work that farmers are doing on the front lines as part of this effort.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and for everybody watching, we're doing for the next 5 or 6 weeks or so, as long as Luba's in my office, we're going to be doing weekly updates from the front, looking at just up-to-date information, providing you with these kinds of updates to give you that deeper, richer understanding of what's really going on. So hopefully you'll be able to join us again for another live video in 7 days.
Yeah. Thank you.